Los Angeles, the city of glitz and glamour. The city where the temperature never strays far from a comfortable 70 degrees. The city that you see on Hollywood billboards and reality TV shows. But behind this fantastical veil of luxury are more mundane, real-life challenges. As the population continues to increase, and with the recent surge of housing prices, a new problem has arisen. The same hard-working people who have helped build up Los Angeles now fear eviction or having to move, as houses and rent are becoming increasingly unaffordable. But what does this mean for our city? This is the central question that we seek to explore in this documentary as we take you through the perspectives of tenants, landlords, and government officials in a panoramic glimpse into our new challenge, the Los Angeles housing crisis.
Homelessness. Look at LA's homeless problem. When you force people out of their homes, they have to live somewhere.
There's an enormous gap. By some estimates, we need about 500,000 additional units of housing in the county of Los Angeles just to house the people who are already here.
Your apartments are your neighborhood, and they're your communities. Our building is 42 units. It generated a revenue of, it was valued on the marketplace somewhere about $5 to $7 million, okay? The people sold it for $11 million, all right? So for us, we found this out really quickly, and then they came in and they immediately said that they were going to convert it into a condominium. And so they posted notes on our doors and said, we're going to turn this into a condominium, and you have 90 days, you have to leave. And we'll pay you, though, so don't worry about it. I had no idea what this was. And so this began my journey of becoming an activist in this situation, where I then reached out to Larry Gross, who I mentioned to you, at the Coalition for Economic Survival. And he basically said, this is an illegal eviction. They're not allowed to do what they're doing.
So the Ellis Act, generally speaking, is a state law that allows landlords to remove their properties from the rental market. So the idea is that if you're a landlord, you shouldn't be required to stay in the landlord business, and you should be allowed to pull your rental units out of the market and then live in them or sell them as condos instead of as rental units. There's reasons why generally you'd want to let people do things like that with their property, but the effect, unfortunately, currently in our housing market is that a lot of people are pulling their properties, affordable units, off of the market and turning them into condominiums for a very different clientele. And so it's having quite a negative impact on housing affordability in Los Angeles currently.
The Ellis Act was established by the Supreme Court decision of Nash versus City of Santa Monica in 1984. The law says that property owners have the unconditional right to evict tenants to quote-unquote go out of the landlord business. Let's break it down into simpler terms. Say we take John and Jennifer Smith, a couple who lives in an apartment building in LA with their 3 kids and 1 dog. One day, they see an eviction notice posted on their door, saying that they have 90 days to leave their apartment. Immediately, Mr. and Mrs. Smith rush to their landlord for an explanation. Mr. Landlord explains that he wants to get out of the rental business. How can he do this, you might ask? Well, according to the Ellis Act, landlords have the unconditional right to evict tenants if they claim that it is to quote-unquote go out of the business. Thus, they have the freedom to turn their property into whatever they want. Unfortunately, however, some property owners take advantage of this act. Because the government does not allow a rent increase of over 2 to 5% per year due to rent control laws, Mr. Landlord can change the countertops to granite, switch out the shower heads, and transform the apartment building into luxury condominiums and charge double the rent. Ellis Act evictions have risen nearly 250% from 2014 to 2015. But now, the Smiths have to find another apartment. They will likely have to move out of their community, leaving their jobs, schools, and friends behind. To wrap it up, the Ellis Act was created to help landlords, but unfortunately, it's been used to hurt the tenants.
What these people do is they use the Ellis Act as a hammer. And they come in and they say, we're going to Ellis your building. We're going to turn it into a condo. This is what we would have to pay you. So here's more money. Okay? Here, we're going to offer you $15,000 instead of the $10,000. But they have no plans on turning it into a condo. That's the thing. They just want to get you out to keep it an apartment so they can raise the rent.
Rent control is the only thing I can think of where there's an absolute disregard to the free market, or a very strong disregard for the free market, and taking advantage of, requiring a private individual to subsidize another private individual.
We manage properties everywhere from Venice and Beverly Hills to East LA and Highland Park, which covers a host different spectrum of the population of Los Angeles. So in all the areas that we manage, the rents have gone up dramatically since 1998. I would say it tripled, and sometimes more than that.
For apartment buildings, it's become harder to invest in buildings because of the expense. It's become very popular to invest in apartment buildings based on the returns, and it's driven up the prices, so it's been created more difficulties in acquiring properties.
Have you noticed how LA has changed radically? All of a sudden, all these new buildings are being put up. A $1,000 apartment in LA just can't be found.
What happened since 1998 is that I think the population has grown in Los Angeles. A lot of applicants applying for apartments I manage are coming in from New York, Boston, and other countries.
The increase in number of people coming to Los Angeles is having a dramatic impact on housing prices. We are not building housing sufficient to house everybody who's coming, so the new folks are bidding up the price of housing.
Immigrants and people that English is a second language to. So you have Armenian immigrants, you have Latinos, you have people who they can come in and they just bully them. They don't know their rights. People they don't know what they have, their rights, and they threaten them. They threaten them with, if you don't take this money, you're gonna lose out on this opportunity, or who knows what'll happen. So people get scared, and what happens then is people are displaced. 1,000 rent-controlled buildings in 1 year have been turned into condominiums or McMansions, but not affordable housing. So that's a lot of people to be displaced for what? It's just for money, and there's no alternative to support them. So people are being taken advantage of by people who have powerful lawyers and money that can force them out.
So a lot of what Inner City Law Center does is work with tenants about what their rights and their responsibilities are as a renter in terms of their duties to the owner of the property, their duties to their neighbors, and also the rights that they have, in particular with respect to their landlord.
By definition, a landlord is going to be the guy on top, and the other guy's going to be the underdog. It's just the way it's always going to be.
You have to be knowledgeable about, is my building rent controlled? What are the laws that protect me? You need to educate people, the tenants, so that they can fight like we've fought. But that puts a lot of onus on people who just, it's like asking everybody to be a lawyer. You be a lawyer, you be a lawyer, you be a lawyer, be your own lawyer. And it takes a lot of pressure, puts a lot of pressure on your shoulders.
Like I said, my main concern is the safety of our tenants. And that has to do with when we inspect, we're inspecting the fire alarms. A lot of times people will take the batteries out of their fire alarms, or they'll run electrical lines where they shouldn't. Well, we had a fire at one of our apartment buildings, and sort of like my worst nightmare came true, and we really was not sure of the cause of it, and so it caused at least $25,000 to $30,000 worth of damage. We had to make sure that it was rebuilt. We had to make sure that it didn't have any hazardous residue, and so we improved it, moved the woman back in, and 2 weeks later she created another fire, so we had to evict them. So this is the hard part of it, but it was for the safety of everyone to have this person moved out. We had to give them 90 days notice. So during that time she could have created another fire.
One gentleman has dementia. His wife is the main caretaker for him, and they are living primarily paycheck to paycheck. They have a very nice apartment. They're paying about $1,100 per month. But if they took a deal from the property managers, which would have been $45,000, that's what they offered them. If they took that deal to leave, within a year, they would be destitute. Your apartments are your neighborhood, and they're your communities. What happened for me is I have a neighborhood. I have friends whose homes I can go to, and we can have barbecues, and we a bonfire. We hang out in front of their houses, and we talk, and same with everybody in my building. We interact. What happened is that this caused me a lot of stress.
The statistic that, to me, best encapsulates why we've seen an increase in homelessness in the city of Los Angeles is that the average rent went up between 2000 and 2013 27%, but the median renter income during that same time period went down by 7%. So you have people's rent costs going up and their incomes going down, and that gap is essentially what is driving a lot of folks to homelessness.
This is not popular for a landlord to say, but if there had to be rent control, what would make sense, not 1978 and that is the line, but rather that it be, let us say, a floating period of 20 years. The first 20 years of a building's life, you can't increase the rent. But after that, you can. Why? Because when it was built with calculations of how much the rent will be, and therefore, for a given period, before it deteriorates, you could, I guess, lock it in.
That people who are homeless have different pathways into that, and you have to figure out what that individual pathway is out of homelessness. Almost always it involves some assistance with housing, a rental subsidy, an actual physical unit, something over some period of time, depending on what their individual situation is, so you need money for that. And for many people, it also involves a host of other services, mental health services, job training services, addiction services, and all those things cost money. So I think if we are going to, if we are going to tackle homelessness more effectively in Los Angeles, we need a lot more resources.
So now, the future is in our hands. We can be spectators in our city's moment of crisis, or we can take a front seat and steer the course of change. We urge you to use what you have learned from this documentary and take action. Continue to ask questions. Explore the facts, spread the stories, have the conversation, and be part of the change.